Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As everyone in the House will be aware, we're currently in the middle of BBC Anti-Scam Awareness Week. And of course, the advice in that context is always simple. If you see a scam, you should report it. So with that in mind, can the Prime Minister advise the House? Is he aware of anyone who's promised to reduce energy bills only for them to increase? Is he aware of anyone who promised to back business only to tax business? And is he aware of anyone who promised to protect pensioners only to pick their pockets for their winter fuel allowance?
In a parliament notorious for its theatrics, Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP at Westminster, commanded the chamber's attention with a series of searingly sharp questions. These weren't just loud, brash declarations, but a surgical dissection. Each question cold and calculated, like a scalpel cutting through the layers of political rhetoric and false promises. Can the Prime Minister tell us? Flynn began, his voice thick with irony and skepticism, each word laced with contempt. He wasn't just asking, he was challenging the leader who once promised to slash energy bills, yet saw them climb to dizzying heights. The government that vowed to support business, only to burden them with crippling taxes. The administration that swore to protect pensioners, yet quietly gutted their winter allowance, cutting away support like a thief in the night. The room froze, the air thickened. His questions were brief, sharply delivered, and brutally honest, and needed no embellishment. Even as the microphone fell silent, a heavy, oppressive unease lingered in the air, as if the chamber itself had taken a collective breath. On the surface, Flynn's words seemed simple, but beneath the cool, controlled delivery lay a razor-sharp indictment. This wasn't just politics, it was a dissection of broken promises, a government caught in its own lies, a government obsessed with crafting polished sound bites, while simultaneously passing laws that directly contradicted their own pledges. Flynn didn't mince words, each point hit with surgical precision, directly targeting the Labour government, and in particular, Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Once known for his calm composure and methodical approach, Starmer now appeared adrift, lost between public expectation and an unchanging status quo. Let's revisit Flynn's opening salvo. Yes, Labour took some steps to tackle the cost of living crisis, including promises to ease energy bills. But what came of it? Energy prices didn't fall, they skyrocketed. The emergency support measures, touted as a lifeline, felt more like a sticking plaster slapped on a gaping wound. The energy cap system, a labyrinth of confusion, left families scrambling, unsure of what they owed or why. Flynn's second strike was equally devastating. Labour, the supposed champion of business, had instead tightened the tax noose. Companies already struggling with the chaos of post-Brexit Britain were hit with rising corporation taxes, higher national insurance rates, and an increasingly hostile regulatory environment. The promise to support business, an empty shell. But it was Flynn's third point, the emotional knockout on pensioners that truly landed. The winter heating allowance, once a rock-solid promise to protect the elderly, was now nothing more than a fading memory. Delayed payments, silent cuts, eligibility criteria shrouded in confusion. Pensioners, the very people Labour swore to protect, were left feeling abandoned, betrayed. Their trust, once unwavering, now teetered on the edge of collapse. Flynn may have been metaphorical in suggesting the government had pocketed the benefit money, but the sentiment was unmistakable, and it stung. The social contract between the state and its elderly citizens, once a pillar of British society, now felt dangerously frayed. And perhaps the most brilliant part of Flynn's strategy was not what he said, but what he didn't. He named no names. He didn't need to. His message was so clear, so direct, that it practically hit you between the eyes. This was no accidental slip of the tongue. It was a masterstroke. Political surgery at its finest. His strategy was like a courtroom tactic. Don't force the jury to the verdict. Let them come to it themselves. And in this performance, the jury was us, the British public. Starmer's response? Predictable and weak. He cited inflation rates. He spoke of job markets. He blamed global instability and the legacy of previous governments. But his rebuttal, hollow. It lacked the resonance of Flynn's incisive opening. Starmer remains the technocrat, adept at navigating spreadsheets and economic jargon, but missing the emotional connection that people crave. He's stuck in yesterday's game, while the rules have already changed. And now, all that remains for him is his legacy.
So we've got about 150 farmers that supply us from the region, and they've all been impacted by the national insurance, obviously, for the wage increases, but also the inheritance tax at a time when their confidence was quite low anyway. And I think that I was at the National Farmers Union conference this week. I was talking on Tuesday at the conference, and I think it was like the national insurance, it was the unpredictability, the fact that, it was something the government said probably wasn't going to happen, and then it happened. So it wasn't as if people even had any time to prepare for it. So it's been a massive shock to the industry, and it's undermined confidence for farmers at a time when we need to be prioritising food production.
And you mentioned your dad earlier,
yes.
And I think your quote was he was cute before the budget. I'm sure he's
still just as cute, honestly.
Well, what has his reaction been? How does he feel as someone who has?
I mean, I can't talk on behalf of my dad, obviously, but I think everyone in the farming community is shocked by the changes and the speed of the changes, and the fact that there was no dialogue beforehand, and also my personal view is I don't believe the government's modelling, because I've got 150 farmers I know personally, and I can't model it. They can't model it, because succession is something that's very difficult to talk about in the farming community. You don't say, what you're going to do when you die. It's nothing that any of us talk about, and actually where it really hits farming families really hard is when there's an unplanned event. So, they lose someone, younger, maybe my age or whatever, unexpected, and then it's not prepared for, and then the family are faced with the prospect of losing their home, losing their business, and losing their father at the same time. And that's where it becomes really, really tough.
While national insurance contributions soar, inheritance tax tightens, and policies spin like a weather vane, the people who feed this nation, our farmers, are left wondering, is there still a place for us in the future of this country? Lately, as ministers deliver bold speeches about economic recovery and energy transition, the voices of rural Britain are growing louder, more desperate, and increasingly frustrated. Behind the postcard-perfect landscapes of the countryside lies a sector buckling under immense pressure, facing not just financial hardship, but a deepening crisis of confidence. Bureaucratic confusion, government indifference, and relentless money worries are wearing down the very soul of farming communities. This isn't just about crops and livestock anymore. This is about survival. One farmer from Somerset who asked to remain anonymous for fear of government retaliation summed it up. You're taxed just for working your own land. Try to pass it on to your children, and you're taxed again. And then, on top of all that, you're expected to completely overhaul your business overnight, with barely a scrap of practical help in return. The frustration is palpable. We can't go on like this. But this isn't just about taxation. Farming is being swept into a storm of change. Carbon reduction targets, post-Brexit subsidy schemes, and a constant barrage of shifting regulations. On paper, these might look like positive reforms, but for those of us on the ground, it feels like being tossed overboard with no life jacket. Policy after policy is choking the life out of our industry. Trade deals flooding the market with cheap imports are undercutting British produce. Planning laws are threatening to turn farmland into housing estates. And through it all, there's a growing sense that food security is being shoved aside in favor of political maneuvering. The government insists otherwise. The agriculture minister drones on about world-leading standards and support for domestic supply chains. But on the ground, those words are starting to ring hollow. The gap between what's said in Whitehall and what's actually happening in the fields has never felt wider. We've heard enough of the empty promises, and the longer the government stays silent, the more this crisis will spiral. If this hit home for you, don't forget to leave a comment, and subscribe for more updates like this. We'll see you in the next video.